Hey, Jeff Young here, the Catholic Foodie at CatholicFoodie.com, and I want to share a book with you today. It's God Help Me, How to Grow in Prayer by Jim Beckman. I mean, check this title out, God Help Me. I pray that prayer all the time. So it really struck me when I saw this book. And then How to Grow in Prayer. I need to grow in prayer. I want to grow in prayer. I know that God wants me to grow in prayer. So it really kind of struck me, and I said, hey, let me read that and see what it's all about. I could really use it. And sure enough, the first 2 pages in the book, Jim Beckman got me. That was it. I was hooked. And he's been involved in youth ministry and youth conferences and just ministry for years. So he's a man of prayer already. But in the first few pages, he talks about how his prayer was so inconsistent, how sometimes he was really deep into prayer and praying consistently and felt close to God and felt like his relationship with God was growing. And then a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, he felt like God was so far away, hardly that he hardly felt like he knew God at all, right? And it was hard to pray during those times. And many times he wouldn't pray if he felt God was far. And I heard that and I thought, well, wait a second, that's my life, right? That's my life. And he starts to explain in the first couple of chapters how we have to understand how prayer works overall. We need to understand what prayer is and how it works so that we can pray better, so that we can grow in prayer. And so in this book, he does something which at first glance, to me at least, I didn't really think it mattered. What he does is he proposes to us a systematic study of prayer. And he says, because if you understand what prayer really is, it'll help you to pray. And so this is what he talks about. He says, you talk about taking the back off, like you would take the back off a clock and see how a clock works. Taking the back off of prayer, checking out all the different pieces, the different components, and see how they all work together. And he says this. He says, if we take the back off and look at all the parts of prayer, we'll come up with a list that sounds like the contents of this book. The human heart, spiritual movements in our heart, the enemy, the measures of prayer, the fundamental dynamics of prayer, short circuits to prayer, Christian imagination, and so on. All of these parts have an important role to play in our experience of prayer or our lack thereof. In fact, not being aware of these parts can actually diminish our prayer. So using the spirituality of St. Ignatius of Loyola, he goes through each of these different components of prayer so that he can help us not to understand how to pray the rosary better, or the liturgy of the hours better, or having an hour of adoration and be able to pray better there. Not any specific form of prayer, but just prayer. What is it? What are the elements involved in it? Let's understand what's going on here, and that way we can understand what God is calling us to, and we can understand the movements that we experience in prayer. Things that St. Ignatius of Loyola call desolation and consolation, right? There are times when we're close to God. There are times when we feel like we're not close to God. What roles do these things play in our lives and in prayer? And if we understand that better, then we can pray better and we can grow in our relationship with God. So, fantastic book. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. If you are looking to grow in prayer, if you are hungering to grow in prayer, if you want to be closer to God and don't quite understand how to do that, this book's for you. How to Grow in Prayer. God Help Me, How to Grow in Prayer, Jim Beckman. You need this book. This is Jeff Young, the Catholic Foodie at CatholicFoodie.com.